Our chalice lighting words today are entitled, "We Travel in Unknown Lands" by UU minister Barnaby Fetter. We kindle a flame we trust will lead us forward as we travel in unknown lands, where the question, "Shall I ever get there?" resounds, a clear, pure note in every silence. Good morning. My name is Elaine Imlau. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I'm speaking to you today from land that is the traditional territory of the indigenous Iowa people. Whenever you hear a land acknowledgement, please consider donating $1 or more to support indigenous organizations or indigenous-led grassroots change movements and campaigns. Encourage others to do the same. Please keep your microphones muted during the entire service. After the service, everyone is welcome to turn on your microphones and join us in coffee hour or the coffee hour breakout rooms. As we lead you through the next hour, try to think of a trip when you made a change from your initial plan. Perhaps you took an alternate route or a wrong turn that led you into something totally unrelated to the intended purpose for your journey.
Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Des Moines. I'm Kent Newman, and my pronouns are he, him, and his. No matter who you are or where you've come from, you are welcome here. Whether or not you live in Des Moines or have ever physically been at First Unitarian. Whoever you are, we hope that here you find thoughts which challenge you, welcoming which invites you into community, and people to accompany you as you journey. Our gathering song today is number 149, Lift Every Voice and Sing. Words by James Weldon Johnson, poet and civil rights activist, music composed by his brother J. Rosamond in 1900. In 1919, the NAACP declared the song the Negro National Anthem 1 year before James Weldon became the first African-American head of the organization. Words will be on your screen. For those of us digitally, please keep your mics muted and simply sing along at home if you would like. The morning offering will now be given and received through the link in the chat. That's what I thought. I think it's time for the children, for the story for all ages. We want to welcome Greta to the stage. Yay! Woo! So great to see you.
Yeah. Good morning. My name is Greta Hayes, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a fifth grader at Hillside Elementary, and my parents are Chelsea and Eric. Our story for all ages today is Change Sings, written by Amanda Gorman and illustrated by Lauren Long. I can hear change humming in its loudest, proudest song. I don't fear change coming, and so I sing along. I scream with the skies of red and blue streamers. I dream with the cries of tried and true dreamers. I'm a chant that rises and rings. There's hope where my change sings. Though some don't understand it, those windmills and mystery, I sing with all the planet and its hills of history. I hum with 100 hearts, each of us lifting a hand. I use my strengths and my smarts, take a knee to make a stand. I'm as bright as the light each day brings. There's love where my change sings. I show others tolerance, though it might take some courage. I don't make a taller fence, but fight to build a better bridge. I talk not only of distances from where and how we came. I also walk our differences to show we are the same. I'm a movement that roars and springs. There's a wave where my change sings. Change sings where? There, inside me, because I'm the change I want to see. As I grow, it grows like seeds. I'm just what the world needs. I'm the voice where freedom rings. You're the love your bright heart brings. We are the waves starting to spring, for we are the change we sing. We're what the world is becoming, and we know it won't be long. We all hear change strumming. Won't you sing along?
Thank you, Greta. And now the morning offering will be given and received through the link in the chat, although those of you here can also contribute. Half of our plate goes to the internal social justice programs of the church, and half to our faith in action partners, Knock and Drop, and Just Voices. If you are giving online, the link will be in the chat.
Center yourself in your chair. Feel your feet on the floor and focus on your breath as you listen to our meditation words for today from Brian Stevenson, Executive Director of the Equal Justice Initiative in Montgomery, Alabama, speaking about the Community Remembrance Project, followed by a few moments of silence. In this soil, there is the sweat of the enslaved. In the soil, there is the blood of victims of racial violence and lynching. There are tears in the soil from all those who labored under the indignation and humiliation of segregation. But in the soil, there is also the opportunity for new life, a chance to grow, something hopeful and healing for the future.
A church is not only a building, but a community. As a community of human hands and human hearts, we come together to share our laughter and our tears, and to bear witness and minister to one another as we struggle with life's sorrows and celebrate life's joys. May we hold in our thoughts and prayers this week a joy sent in by Jill Moser. Florence Freddy turns 99 on Valentine's Day. Please send our birthday cards and wishes to our longtime, much-loved member. Let us share together now the names of anyone we know who could use some special care and attention. As we type their names into the chat, may the love of this community hold them all. May the light of our community shine on the broken places of the world. May the work of our hands and hearts support, aid, and comfort all those who hunger or thirst for food or water, justice or freedom. May we never look away when we are needed. May those who are grieving be comforted. May those who are tired find rest. May the broken places be healed. May those who are filled with joy and laughter be abundant. Now together we light 3 candles, one for the joys and sorrows we have shared, one for the names we have written, and one last candle for all the joys and all of the sorrows which are deeply held but remain unspoken here today. Our first reading today is Be the Bridge, Pursuing God's Heart for Racial Reconciliation by Latasha Morrison. If you're white, if you come from the majority culture, you'll need to bend low in a posture of humility. You may need to talk less and listen more, opening your heart to the voices of your non-white brothers and sisters. You'll need to open your mind and study the hard truths of history without trying to explain them away. You'll need to examine your own life and the lives of your ancestors so you can see whether you've participated in, perpetuated, or benefited from systems of racism. And today we have a guest soloist. Thank you to Lori Young from Just Voices and Corinthian Baptist Church for connecting Elaine with our guest soloist, Solomon Smith, visiting with us today from Corinthian Baptist Church. Solomon will now sing A Change Is Gonna Come by Sam Cooke, released in mid-February 1964, inspired by events in Cooke's life when he and his entourage were turned away from a whites-only motel in Louisiana. This song is ranked number 3 in Rolling Stone's 500 Greatest Songs of All Time last year, in 2021. Please welcome Solomon.
I was born by the river in a little tin hole, just like this river I've been running ever since. It's been a long I know a change gon' come. Oh, yes it will. It's been too hard living, but I'm afraid to die, 'cause I don't know what's up there behind the sky. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes it will. I go to the movies and I go downtown, but somebody keep telling me don't hang around. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes it will. Then I go to my brother and I said, brother, help me please. But then he winds up knocking me back down on my knees. Oh, there were times when I thought I couldn't last for long, but I think I'm able to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes it will. Then I go to my brother and I said, brother, help me please. But then he winds up knocking me, yeah, back down on my knees. Oh, there were times that I thought I couldn't last for long, but I think I'm able to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes it will. A change gonna come. Oh, yes it will.
Wow, thank you, Solomon. Been a long time since we had that much soul in this church. Yeah, that's right. Thanks for bringing it. Thanks for bringing it. Our second reading today is an excerpt from an interview with Brian Stevenson entitled, Brian Stevenson on How America Can Heal, on the Ezra Klein podcast, broadcast July 20th, 2020. Ezra asked Brian, what is a healthy relationship for society to have with its own history? Part of his answer follows. So for me, it begins with honesty. If you've done something wrong to someone else and you genuinely don't know what you've done wrong, you're not going to be able to fully reconcile with that person. You're not going to be able to adequately apologize. You're not going to be able to say the things you need to say to create a path toward recovery. You have to know what you did, and once you understand what you did, you can then begin to calibrate all the things that have to happen for you to try to make peace, for you to recover, and to create fellowship again. We have committed ourselves in this country to silence about our history, to ignorance about our history, to denying our history. And that's the first part of this relationship that has to be repaired. We've got to be willing now to talk honestly about who we are and how we got here. Our centering song today is number 1007 in the Teal Hymnal. There's a river flowing in my soul. Our centering song this morning was written by Rose Teray Sanders.
I love new adventures, traveling to new places, meeting new people, and discovering things new to me. Late last September, I was driving to the Gulf Coast for a trip with a college friend. I picked up my friend at the airport in New Orleans, and over the next week, we worked our way up to Nashville, where I dropped her at the airport and continued my adventure home. On my way down to New Orleans, I considered meandering from the interstate to the Great River Road along the Mississippi River. As I was looking at the route, a certain town name popped out at me. Now I definitely had to change my plan. Just before reaching that town, I passed through the town of Lakeview on the shore of Horseshoe Lake. This oxbow lake was formed over the years of the Mississippi changing its course, cutting off the curve from the flow of the river. There was what looked to be a new fishing pier with a good view of the cypress trees scattered in the lake. I stopped to take a closer look. I struck up a conversation with the man fishing on the pier and asked him what he knew about that next town down the road. As a recent transplant, he said he wasn't familiar with the history of the area. A native of Mississippi, he was part of the northern migration in his younger years and had returned south after retiring from the ministry in Cleveland. I'd say he's semi-retired and still taking every opportunity to spread the gospel. Among other things, he talked about his concern for all the folks who hadn't taken Christ for their Savior. When I managed to get in a few words, I mentioned that I was probably one of those folks he was worried about. With the time slipping away, I did not take the opportunity to share my religious ideas and beliefs. I wished him well and went on my way. Less than 15 minutes down the road, there was my destination. A good thing, too, since I was down to the last 18 miles on my gas tank. In my excitement, I'd forgotten to stop for gas at bigger towns along the way. I had to stop and take a picture of that usual green road sign announcing the town. It read, Elaine, population 636. Now, I rarely meet other people who share my first name, but a town? Never have I ever encountered a town bearing my first name. I did find one bearing my last name in Austria, but that's another story. The next sign with my name on it was for the Elaine trailhead on the Delta Heritage Bike Trail. Cool, my name on a bike trail. Next, lucky for me, the first business I came upon was Robert's One Stop, selling gas, groceries, fried chicken, and other necessities. Relief. Then I saw the gas pump and I wasn't so sure. I asked another patron going in if I could really get gas from that old pump. She confirmed it really worked. Gas tank filled and fried chicken by my side for lunch, I continued into town. The initial scene was pretty grim, with shells of roofless, windowless brick buildings for most of the first block. My faded name appeared on the grocery store and a recreation center. On the corner building, however, was a new sign reading, "Coming soon, Elaine Museum and Civil Rights Center." Elaine, motherland of civil rights. I was in the South, but I wasn't sure what that was all about. Down the block, things improved. Newer, well-kept buildings included the fire station, the Baptist church, the Church of God, and the post office. I stopped in the post office and asked the clerk how the town got its name. She said it started out as a train depot, but beyond that, she suggested I talk to Mary Olsen at the Elaine Legacy Center in the old school. So I continued my exploration around town. Driving up and down all 5 north-south streets and all 9 east-west streets, I noticed 4-way stops at every intersection. Very unusual for a town of 600, I thought. I found the closed-up high school built in 1984, chained and padlocked, with the bulletin board inside faded and missing a few letters in its display. No sign of the Legacy Center, though. On down the street were a couple more buildings that looked like schools. The parking lot was empty, but I saw a sign that said Community Center, and there on the next building was the Elaine Legacy Center sign, and again, the Motherland of Civil Rights sign. No one appeared to be around, but I found the door unlocked and ventured in. On the white marker board was the phrase, "We used to own land, but," and marker drawings of a black man, a matchbox house, a shotgun house, and a row of books with the words, "Knowledge through reading." A bulletin board had photos of the Obama family and the inauguration with the words, "This would not be possible without the Elaine 12." I wondered what that meant. On the wall, there was a Motherland of Civil Rights t-shirt and a conference flyer from February of 2000 about the Elaine race riots. Then I found a printed copy of a PowerPoint entitled Synergy of History Through Rural Elaine Area. It listed the 1919 Elaine Massacre, the 1923 Supreme Court case, Moore versus Dempsey, the Hopewell Indian Mounds Trail of Tears and 1919 mass grave, the construction of the bike path, and the development of the Lakeview National Historic District. Looking further through the document raised more questions in my mind. Photos of locations involved in the massacre, the train station, Main Street, the hanging tree with about a dozen bodies hanging, the church where the massacre began, the church where the Elaine 12 worshiped together, the sites of the mass graves, the memorial willow tree planted by the trailhead of the bike path in 2019, the Lakeview relocation project from 1937 to 38, when the federal government offered low-interest loans to relocate African Americans in the area of the massacre and mass graves. I would have to look into this further when I had the chance. For now, I had to get back on the road and get to New Orleans. Later in the trip, my friend and I stopped in Montgomery to see the National Memorial for Peace and Justice and the Legacy Museum. This was my second visit, but this time I had something specific to find. I found the names of a few killed in the 1919 massacre. In the Community Remembrance Project area of the museum, I found the jars of soil dug up from the massacre mass burial site and very brief information about the massacre. But the most compelling information I learned was through further research and conversations after I returned home. With the 100th anniversary of the massacre in 2019, there are quite a few articles about the massacre to be found online. Compared to the original news articles and encyclopedia accounts reporting a race riot, quite different versions of what happened are coming to light. Early stories claim that about 100 Negro sharecroppers met on September 30th planning to kill all whites. A group of white men, possibly local law enforcement officers, went to check it out. It isn't known who fired the first shot between the visitors and the men standing guard around the church, but the gunfire exchange resulted in the death of a white man. The next day, hundreds of white people from the surrounding area came in to rise up against the Negroes who started the riot. Bloodshed ensued until soldiers came in to stop the violence 2 days later. Over 100 Negro men and women were arrested and charged. 1 month later, they were tried and found guilty in mere minutes of deliberation. 12 were sentenced to the electric chair. Word got out through a Negro news reporter who passed for white. Organizations came to the assistance of the 12 on death row. Over the next 4 years, their case was eventually reviewed by the Supreme Court in Moore versus Dempsey in 1923. All 12 were exonerated and released on the grounds of not receiving a fair trial. Stories that have come out over the years reveal that the people meeting at the church were unionizing to get fair prices for their cotton. Over 200 and possibly more Black men, women, and children were killed over the 3 days of the massacre. Only 5 whites were killed. Only Blacks were arrested, with charges for the deaths of the 5 whites. No whites were ever held responsible for the hundreds of Blacks killed. Other accounts from Black residents reveal that they were not only sharecroppers working for white plantation owners, but land-owning farmers as well. I had a long phone conversation with Reverend Mary Olsen, operations director of the Elaine Legacy Center. Mary is a transplant originally from Wisconsin and has been working in Elaine for over 20 years. Along with James White, program director, local resident, and descendant of family members killed in the massacre, they have conducted programs for kids, a food pantry, and clothes closet. A bigger goal, to develop income for the community, involves heritage tourism, with the future museum that will be dedicated September 30th of this year. Sites from the massacre are around town and along the main highway and the bike trail. Mary talked of drawing in groups of people to visit the sites and hear the oral histories from residents, perhaps incorporating community service projects like painting a church and building a porch for an older resident. Mary brought to my attention several videos on the Legacy Center website. I found one video in particular profoundly moving of resident Lenora Marshall giving her speech entitled, "Descendants of the Elaine Massacre Still Living in the Area of the Killings." Here it is. "We are descendants of the largest racial massacre in U.S. history. Today, out of the sacred memory spaces of our hearts and our lands arise a people called Elaine. A people determined to create a different world, a people without resources, but determined to build a world of equity for all people, for our children and our children's children. Equity that does not take from one to give to another, but to increase the quality of life for all. We may not change the world, but we will be a model for how the world can change. We are poor, among the poorest in the United States, living on some of the richest soil of the world. But we are determined to show the world how to move from poverty to equity. In today's language, we call it entrepreneur love, peace, and hope. Yesterday, our elders called it being God's hands and God's feet. This is to say, we don't just dream it will happen. God, through us, makes it happen. That is authentic Elaine. It means building on our sacred memory with determination to create equity for all. Inspired by this speech and my initial conversation with Mary, I thought of the bike trail in Horseshoe Lake. I know social justice-minded people interested in history, people who are good listeners, people who are skilled builders, people interested in bicycling and paddling. By the end of another phone conversation, I promised Mary that I would do my best to gather a group of people for perhaps the maiden journey of the Elaine Legacy Tour. I'm not exactly sure when it will happen, and it may be a bit rustic and disorganized the first time around, but I do know for sure I will go back to Elaine again. Might any of you join me in this endeavor? Oh, and I almost forgot. I did find out how the town got its name. It just didn't seem so important after everything else I've learned. There are a couple of versions of that story too. One says real estate investor and developer Harry Kelly, who owned the property, had a daughter named Elaine. Another source said he was enamored with a certain popular movie star of the time, Elaine Hammerstein, cousin to Oscar Hammerstein. I'd never heard of her either. Oh, the things you can learn when you meander off the interstate.
As we extinguish the chalice today, our reading is from UU Minister Amy Zucker Morgenstern. It becomes more. When we take fire from our chalice, it does not become less, it becomes more. As we extinguish our chalice, may we take its light and warmth with us, multiplying the power by all of our lives and sharing it with the world. Our closing song today is number 1024 in the Teal Hymnal, When the Spirit Says Do. Our final song this morning is an African-American spiritual. This song was passed down in the oral tradition and sung at every civil rights gathering in the 1950s and 60s. The words will be on the screen. If you are here digitally, please remain muted and sing along at home.
says do. You got to do what the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you got to do. You got to do when the Spirit says do. 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 Before our closing words, I want to thank everyone for putting on the service here in the auditorium today. Rob Melkinson on sound, Hannah Notch on tech, celebrant Kent Newman, pianist Bruce Martin, reader Greta Hayes, and especially guest soloist Solomon Smith. Solomon, you do your mother proud. Thanks to Harvey Harrison for connecting me to Lori Young, and Lori for connecting me to Solomon. Last of all, thanks to editor extraordinaire David Whitkey, and both David and Joe Fitz for encouraging me to do this today. After the closing words, we'll sing the first few lines of When the Spirit Says Do again. Just follow Bruce. Our closing words are from the book The Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. All that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change.